What you're looking at is a map of states that I have outlined that seem to be growing by the day, where faithless electors might come into play on the 19th of December and change the election results. After doing some more digging into who the electors are and their backgrounds and the makeup of the state governments, these are the 8 states I find to be most likely to switch and actually have Republican electors abstain from voting or switch to Hillary Clinton. The total of these states comes to 118. And if I've done my math correctly, there's only 37 of those 118 possibilities that would need to come through to get this to a decision in the House of Representatives. Some of these states have a little bit more of a chance than others, but I'll go over each of them briefly. I've covered some of them in previous videos, so I'll try not to repeat myself and maybe just elaborate a little bit more as to the reasoning involved. Start with Pennsylvania. That state, to my mind, is probably the most likely. It's a state where the Republicans that live in that state are very middle of the road, very moderate, and somebody like Donald Trump, who has already displayed some very questionable characteristics since he's been elected, they might not want to see the Republican Party go down that road. Now, if anybody who's watching this is a Trump supporter, just let me say right off the bat, I'm not a giant fan of Hillary Clinton. Most Democrats weren't a fan of Hillary Clinton. In fact, I think if most Democrats had had their choice, they would have had Bernie Sanders. And from my perspective, that's not much better, but definitely better than her. The point in saying that being is that these videos have all been based on things that can be done legally, things that can be done constitutionally, going out rioting and damaging people's property and making threats. That never gets anything done. That makes us a banana republic, and on both sides. So if you're a Trump supporter that's threatening civil war if Trump isn't elected, then that makes you part of the problem. You know, and if you're a Hillary Clinton supporter that's threatening any kind of violence or harm to anyone if Trump is elected, then once again, part of the problem. So, a state like Pennsylvania, like I said, would only need a fourth, maybe, of their 20 electors to default or abstain. And once again, you know, you're going to have people that say there's laws. Well, there's no faithless elector laws in Pennsylvania. So, it would just be what it is. And if you think that's, Trump supporters, if you think that's a liberal thing, guess where else there's no faithless elector laws? Texas. And nobody's ever called that a liberal state. They don't bind their electors. And you can look that up. There's no law in Texas binding electors to the results. Now, I'm not saying those electors are going to switch, but electors having the ability to decide for themselves who they want to vote for, whichever way the popular vote in their state went, is something that is not new. It's not something that's happened recently, but if you look back into the history of elections in this country, it happened a lot. In fact, later in this video, I'll detail the Republican-Democrat Party and how they used that as a strategy to deny the American people the right to pick their president. But let me go through these states real quick. Ohio. Once again, faithless elector laws, yes. Governor's John Kasich, he won't enforce it. His problems with Donald Trump are well documented on the internet. I'm not going to waste everybody's time with that. 18 electors, so 20 in Pennsylvania, 18 in Ohio. Just those 2 states alone would put him below the number. A new state that I hadn't considered, but having talked with some friends there, is Indiana. Indiana has no faithless elector laws. Mike Pence is no no friend to the folks of Indiana. I'm sure there's some folks there who support him, but everybody I've talked to on both sides said that he's really made some enemies, having left. And, that might be something where a lot of Indiana's vote comes from Indianapolis and up near Chicago in the Gary region. And those are pretty liberal areas, so that could be something you see. Wisconsin, I know they're doing a recount up there, where that would actually flip the representation from Republican electors to Democrat electors. We'll see how that goes. I'm not a big fan of recounts, because it actually argues against the reason for faithless electors, and that's a bit of a complicated argument, but basically, faithless electors would say that, okay, we're going to accept the results of the election, and this is the group of people we're going to send, and we're going to trust their judgment. Well, when you go to recounts, that says to those 10 Republican electors in Wisconsin that we don't trust your judgment to do the right thing. And you can't really argue both sides at the same time. So, plus the governor up there, Scott Walker, he's kind of basically Donald Trump Jr. So, that's probably a long shot. Utah, Governor Herbert, Jason Chaffetz, Mitt Romney's a Mormon, and Len Beck was a Mormon, and Donald Trump has said some pretty nasty things about both of those people, and both of those people said some pretty nasty things about him. To say that the Republican contingent in Utah is a big fan of Donald Trump or his supporters, I'm not thinking so. North Carolina, that's kind of an interesting thing going on there, with Roy Cooper and the governor. They're having a bit of a problem with the recount, and it's looking like the sitting Republican governor might be replaced by a Democratic governor. And if that's the case, that can make a big deal if those electors would flip and decide to ignore the popular vote and switch to Donald Trump, switch from Donald Trump to Hillary Clinton. I think having a Democratic governor versus a Republican governor could be the deciding factor. Alabama, Governor Bentley, he was a pretty vocal critic of Donald Trump. I don't know enough about Alabama to speak about it, but I do know that they don't have faithless elector laws, and if something like that would happen, the governor, based on past statements, I don't think would do much about it. There's issues down here in Florida as well. Not so much with the vote, but you have to have somebody to enforce those laws, and Florida has been a state that's gone both directions a ton of times and back and forth, and we've got almost over 3 weeks between now and when those electors meet. So many things can happen, and once again, Trump supporters, I know you're probably watching this video and ready to troll the comments and call me all sorts of names, and that's fine if that's what's going to make you feel better. Go ahead and do that. This guy spent, Donald Trump speaking of, all the 90s in bed with the Clintons, supporting liberals. He gave money to Harry Reid. He gave money to Rahm Emanuel. He's called the Clintons great people. He called Obama a champion when he beat John McCain and Mitt Romney. He ran on this platform of wanting to prosecute Clinton, and his words, not mine, came out and said she suffered enough, doesn't want to pursue it. And that's not, he wasn't misquoted there. It came right out of his mouth. That's what he said. So the problem with Donald Trump isn't whether you believe in his ideas or not. You have to believe in his veracity and his ability or desire to actually follow through on anything he promised on the campaign trail. And I think we're seeing now why. A lot of people had a problem with him, not just his politics, but his integrity. And there is so much evidence in this man's past that the only thing he cares about is himself and his pocketbook. And that's great for a businessman. That's great for the shareholders of a business. If you have somebody in charge of a business that's all about making money, and that's great. But it's not great for somebody who's going to be in charge of the country. Because he's 70 years old, and he's never once expressed any kind of a desire to help out America or make America great. Where was he when Obama was running? Did he not think that that would have been a time to do it? I mean, where was he when, the Tea Party was starting? Where was he all these last 8 or 10 or 12 years? When, if he truly is a conservative or a Republican, where was he? Was he saying a word about anything? No, he wasn't. What this guy did was stick his finger in the wind, and he saw an opportunity. He really did. He saw an opportunity, and he jumped out in front of a bunch of people that were moving in one direction already and said, "Follow me." And I'm not going to go through the laundry list of things with the immigration that he's backpedaled on, with Obamacare he's backpedaled on, the wall, and all this crap. As a Republican, you should really think about all of the different options you had when the primary started. There was a football team with backups full of Republican options up there, and some really great people. Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, John Kasich, Jeb Bush, not so great, but definitely better than Donald Trump. And this guy bullied his way through the primary and insulted people's families, questioned their parentage, did some of the most horrible things. And now when it comes time for the Electoral College meeting, and there's a question, he's expecting the same people that he savaged and insulted and demeaned to have his back and to support him. You're out of your mind. It's just not going to happen. But I promised earlier in the video I was going to cover something about the Republican Party. Some years ago, in the last century, or the century before that in the 1800s, the Republicans and Democrats were one party. And one of their tactics used to be that they would run more than one candidate simultaneously under the same party ticket. And the strategy there was that all of the votes would get split up, and nobody would be running against them, or any of the three candidates they put up would have the ability to get the majority vote. The reason they did that was just specifically so Congress would get the decision, and they would be able to install who they wanted as president. That was a strategy. And that party ended up becoming what we know today as the Republican and Democrat Party. That's how they used to block out opposition. And I don't know if that's still legal today. I'll have to check on it. But that could have been done this year with the Republicans. They didn't have to nominate just one guy. They could have nominated, 5 or 10 and run them all. And they would have gotten lots and lots of votes. Nobody would have gotten a majority. And then they would have let Congress decide who the president is. This has happened many, many times in our past. This isn't something new, Trump supporters. And I will say this to the Hillary Clinton supporters as a caveat. I hate to say it, but you kind of created Donald Trump. You created him. Because after Bush left office, you put up a guy that had almost no experience whatsoever. And he had a very questionable background. Speaking of Barack Obama. And we ran, Republicans, because at that time I was, a very moderate guy, John McCain. John McCain had had a history of working with Democrats, working across the aisle. You can look up his history of legislation and bipartisan efforts. Even CNN called him the Maverick Republican because he worked with so many Democrats. That's who we put up to run against Barack Obama. We decided to move toward the Democrats. And what happened? 98% of black people in that election voted for Barack Obama because he was a black guy. For the first black president. Now, if that's not racist, I don't know what is. So that's okay, fine. And you also chose him over Hillary Clinton, who should have been your choice. 8-10 years ago, she was a much healthier woman and had a ton more experience. So 4 years after that, instead of deciding, okay, we're going to run somebody even farther to the right, we put up Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney was another northeastern rhino liberal-ish Republican. as middle of the road as you can get. And he actually did Obamacare before Obamacare did Obamacare. They had socialized medicine that worked great up in Massachusetts. He was a popular governor. But what happened in that one? The people on the right, 10 million Southern evangelical Christians, stayed home and didn't vote for him. Obama actually got fewer votes from Democrats in the 2012 election than he did in the 2008 election. But Romney got even fewer because of that. So that's on the Republicans there. You know, and now here we are, and we have to choose somebody new because this guy has to go out, and we had two extreme cases. You know, we had 4 people at one time, and it was just a nightmare of who we were going to try to choose. But just like they've always done, the Republicans and Democrats pushed every other option out. The first thing they had the media do was get that one candidate, I can't remember his name, but they caught him up on a question about Aleppo. Now, I'm sorry, and they called him out to be a fool. And, you know, it's just ridiculous every time. Every time somebody tries to step up, ask Ron and Rand Paul when they tried to run as libertarians, how they were savaged by the media and had a completely different standard set for them than they did everybody else. So I fault both the Republicans and the Democrats for the mess we're in now. And hopefully Electoral College can put both of these candidates away, Clinton and Trump, and maybe somehow pick a couple of people that are willing to work with each other, maybe from both parties, and give us a couple of leaders, a president and a vice president, that can actually start to get some things done without all the hateful rhetoric and without all the nonsense. And the next time we have an opportunity to elect somebody, maybe we will just exclude anyone with an R or a D by their name. And that's what I would like to see happen. So anyway, I'm sure I've pissed off a lot of people with this one, but so be it. Merry Christmas, and sometimes the truth hurts. God bless.